Hello, podcast listener. Are you attracted to Dracula? Well, if you are, you're not going to like this episode of JJ Meets World. I got some real opinions on it. Plus some other stuff. We're going to cover a lot of ground today. So sit back, relax, or don't. Sit somewhere uncomfortable, like a throne made of swords that are pokey, like from Game of Thrones. But this is JJ Meets World. Glad you're here. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
Tucker, I went to a kid's birthday party. It was like his 7th grade birthday, and his parents had rented a hotel room, adjoining hotel rooms at, I believe, the Holiday Inn. Poolside, right? So isn't that the best birthday when you're a kid?
Yep. Yeah, you're in the hotel room eating Domino's pizza, and then you run straight in a straight line from the Domino's pizza table to the pool and just jump in.
It's great. It's so much, and there's usually like 2 liters of soda, and like it's just great. And then you have the cake out by the pool, you know, because there's nothing that makes you hungrier than the smell of chlorine.
Found my first porno in one of those situations.
Did you really?
Someone had tucked a Hustler underneath like the couch. Whoever had used it previously. And it wasn't me who found it. Another kid found it, and then the dad took it away like right away. But I remember that distinctly.
It was like, whoa! Whoa! So his parents there were maybe a dozen of us, I want to say. And his parents had also rented a VCR and let us rent some tapes. And they're good people. I still know them to this day. In fact, I was just talking to the dad not too long ago about Meatloaf, the food, not the musician.
How old do you think you were?
I think I was in 7th grade. Okay.
So like 96.
Yeah. So I would say 96 is a good guess. Somewhere around there. In fact, it might have been, I want to say like 6th or 7th grade, one of those. And that dials into where the story goes. So one of the things we rented was the movie Barbed Wire, which stars Pamela Anderson, and it's sort of a futuristic assassin story. Yeah. And it's dystopian for sure. And of course, you know, this is her first big role since Baywatch, right? And I just listened to her audiobook read by her called Love, Pamela. And there's a lot of stuff that came into my knowledge base that I didn't know before that we'll get into in a second. But so we watch Barbed Wire, and we are way too young to be watching Barbed Wire. Not just because of the violence, but there's also the first 20 minutes of it is just like nonstop nudity. Right?
Are the parents in the room?
No.
While you're watching?
They're in the adjoining room. Yeah. And actually, so it's his dad and younger brother who are sleeping in the other room, right? So we're watching this, and then all of a sudden, I start getting picked on. And I don't know why everyone there decides to pick on me. But one person's like, JJ's farting. I can hear him farting. And I was like, I'm not farting. And at this point, I am sleeping on the floor. And these guys are like teasing me and making noise. And I'm like, shut up, you guys. And his dad bursts through the adjoining door and he's like, I told you guys to go to sleep. You know, it's midnight. Go to bed. And he goes, if I have to come in here again, you're going to be in trouble. So they start making noise again because boys will be boys, right? He comes in a second time and he goes, all right, that's it. Who's talking? And they all point at me. And I get bullied. And he goes, JJ, you're sleeping in the other room. So I get pulled out of the room with all the guys and brought into this room. And now I'm sharing a bed with his younger brother. And I am miserable. I remember like starting to cry a little bit, being like, this is ridiculous. Like they essentially ganged up on me and stuff like that. And so I was like, forget this. And so I got up and I'm only wearing my PJs and I leave the room. Like I get up and I walk out of the door and my shoes, I've got my shoes with me and I walk to the front desk and I was like, do you have a courtesy phone? And I called my parents at like 3:00 in the morning and I said, hey, you got to come pick me up. I'm miserable. And so they came and picked me up. I never told the dad that I was leaving. And so the next day, I think that there's a real big panic moment here of what was going on. And luckily, I didn't end up interacting with that kid like at all for the rest of my adult life.
Yeah, but you're saying they're good people, though.
Yeah, they are. Yeah,
so they just made a mistake. It was
no. I don't think that the parents did anything wrong. I think it was their son and the other kids who claimed to be my friends or maybe classmates. And I'm like, if you didn't want me at this birthday party, I didn't need to come.
How would you feel if hypothetically one day I'm like, hey JJ, why don't you meet me over here? We're going to record an episode of our podcast, JJ Meets World, and you walk into the room and it's me and it's all those boys.
Yeah.
As adults now. And they want to talk to you about it. And some of them are apologetic, but some of them are a little obstinate. And they're like, well, you were farting.
Oh, yeah, right?
Like, JJ, you were farting.
But I wasn't.
JJ, listen, you've been farting during this recording.
They continue their bullying me here. You know, I'll say is I would love to say this because I know at least half of them have really kissed my rump with my local celebrity. And I think that probably the thing that hurts them the most is here's a kid that they were cruel to that now gets to do fun things like interview celebrities and go backstage at places and, you know, is doing well for themselves despite the fact that they were treated so poorly. And some might say that was a little bit of the karma building up. And it's why I treat people the way I treat them and try and like approach everything with kindness and enthusiasm because I was bullied like that. And that wasn't the beginning or the end of it too. Oh, now I also have watched some of their lives totally and completely implode. And so I kind of want to be like, well, that sucks.
Yeah.
I don't wish anyone any kind of harm, but I also don't have time to, like, this has been something I've really thought about lately. I have got to stop having empathy for people who don't deserve it from me. And recently, like, I had a friend who, after they had been drinking quite a bit, texted me and needed like all of my attention. And when I wasn't able to give it to them because I was at a play, they got mad and they took out their aggression on me. And I thought to myself, this isn't fair. Like, I'm not going to go home and feel bad that I didn't text this person back. They don't own my time. And that has happened so much in my life lately that I've really started being like, you know what? Never mind. You know, like, if, you know, I am fine. Like, if you're having a moment, you need somebody, and, you know, even if you take that aggression out on me, but I've willingly given you the opportunity to do that, I'll take it. But, like, come on, man.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, when it's just adult to adult, the card you have to play is, you know, their presence in your life. And vice
bingo,
versa.
right?
And so, yeah, it's listen, if you care about you, but there's in no way, shape, or form I deserve any of this right now, and so you can just not be in my presence. I don't need to be in yours.
Yeah. I get people tell me I'm a doormat a lot, and like I've got to stop being a doormat. And like, but you know what? Sometimes people need a doormat in their lives. My decision is how long I want to keep that in front of the door.
I wouldn't say you're a doormat. I'd say you're a threshold.
Oh, okay, sure. People are constantly carrying their brides and grooms across me.
Yeah. And sometimes, you know, you have to leave them standing on the doormat.
Yeah.
You know, you don't let them cross the threshold.
No, 100%. Right.
So I think maybe there are times where you should have left that person on the doormat or told them stay there. You know,
like a vampire.
Yeah.
Don't invite them in.
Definitely don't.
Right.
You've made that mistake multiple times in your life.
I certainly have, my friend. I certainly have. I also know that
JJ has a real vampire problem. It's weird.
Just, yeah,
it's plagued him
constantly.
for a long time. He needs to be more standoffish.
Here's the thing that I've never really understood. Okay, while we're on the subject of vampires, why are vampires the sexiest of the monsters? Because there's nothing about a vampire that I find to be erotic, but my God, would you agree that is probably the one that is the most like fantasized about?
If we're talking the sort of genres of monsters that were like the universal monsters,
yeah,
that kind of created, I guess you could say, Dracula is the only one who is human appearing until he shows you his teeth, right? So like because
all the time, because the Wolfman is also when he's not wolfy.
But he has to become this monster that is not human appearance in what at all, right? So the Draculas get to be deceptive, right? And so what's the most deceptive but to appear as someone who's like really beautiful and really sexy?
But they're not though. Even like when you think of like even the universal depiction of it, it's a cape, and they usually have like these like weird dead eyes. Their skin is very pale because they never get any sun.
But you got to remember, beauty standards change over time, JJ. And at that time, being a walking corpse was probably really hot.
But this is, I guess, this leans into my point. We are in an era right now where I feel like the Wolfman look. I see men wearing their hair and beard like that all the time now. They're practically Wolfmans. The Frankenstein dad body, that kind of like big brooding sort of like thing, like that's way in. I mean, my God, have you seen a JCPenney catalog lately? I don't understand why we're not like, sexualizing those monsters.
Right. We're missing an opportunity to sexify the mummy look.
Bingo, right?
Okay, so of your close friends, who could pull off each of these sexy looks the best, do you think?
Oh, okay. So, hold on. Let's figure out what we're talking. We're talking about Swamp Thing, Wolfman.
Swamp Thing and Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Creature from the Black Lagoon. Yes. Swamp Thing was the ripoff, the modern day ripoff of it. Creature from the Black Lagoon, all fish-like. Then you've got Frankenstein, you've got Dracula, you've got a Wolfman, you have the Mummy.
You've got the Invisible Man.
Invisible Man. Okay. So, I mean,
You've got Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah.
She'd be in there.
Which, here's the thing. Even Universal has problems with their naming because the Bride of Frankenstein marries the monster.
Right.
But, like, the monster's not Frankenstein. The doctor is Frankenstein.
But the movie of Frankenstein's monster is just called Frankenstein, right? So I think that
based on the book,
right,
Frankenstein by Mary Shelley,
right,
which is a woman. If you didn't know that, it's not like an old timey name where they just picked it and they ran with it.
Who's got the best, I guess, Frankenstein bod of the guys? I think the guy I know with the best Frankenstein bod is probably Matt McGregor.
Oh.
Actually, Ree maybe, but probably Matt McGregor. But Ree has more of the lumbering, will he kill me vibe
bingo.
Going on.
Like there's a little girl picking daisies. Is he going to throw her and drown her in the lake, or is he going to pick daisies? We don't know.
Is it going to be like Lenny in Grapes of Wrath with the bunny rabbits?
Gosh, I don't know. Like...
that's not the right story. That's not Grapes. Grapes of Wrath is a different.
No, you're thinking of Mice and Men.
Mice and Men.
Both by Steinbeck though.
That's what I did. There we go.
Yeah.
Let me just get that right real quick.
Public education, everybody. Did you ever read Grapes of Wrath?
Yeah, we read it in school.
It's such a depressing book.
Yeah, it is really depressing.
Like
Mice and Men really moved me though. I remember being like really taken back by that.
The SNL did a parody of that when John Malkovich hosted, because John Malkovich, played Lenny in the movie that came out in the early 90s.
With Gary Sinise, right?
With Gary Sinise. And I remember Rob Schneider playing Curly and wearing his one glove so that he can keep his hand soft for his wife. And I remember we had an entire class discussion about that when we first read that. And like our teacher explaining what was going on. And I wanted to be like, you don't need to explain any further. Like we get it. Like, you don't need to go any further about how, like, being a cowman was a tough life. Be like, no, we get it. We know. But that being said, I thought Grapes of Wrath was really depressing. Of Mice and Men was really great. The parodies of Mice and Men are fantastic if you watch that SNL sketch, because it has, instead of Lenny and who is his buddy? Who is Gary Sinise?
Is his brother.
Right, but like, what was his character's name? Do you remember?
I'm blanking on it.
I can't. I only remember Curly because his wife.
I can remember Lenny.
So they did it where they're like, after a test audience didn't enjoy this, we've actually re-edited the movie, and so they're both Lenny. And so it's Chris Farley playing like other Lenny, and they keep killing all the rabbits, and it's delightful. Like, it was really well done. I just watched Chris Rock just hosted Saturday Night Live this last weekend.
I've been seeing this. I've been seeing this pop up in news clips that it's sparking reaction.
Mm-hmm. There's two sketches you should see. One that takes place in a hospital and has a special guest star that is under like this like hospital sheet for like 3/4 of the sketch. It's pretty good.
Okay.
And like, do you remember the famous sketch from the like late 80s or maybe like early 90s where everyone vomits and like they have like 9 vomit machines going all at the same time?
I think so.
Where it's like a crime scene and someone throws up and it makes someone else throw up and like it's ridiculous. Like the whole set gets covered. Well, they do a blood cannon in this that is really good stuff. But the other one is, I haven't even seen the full sketch, but he's pitching an idea for an episode of The Simpsons that he's going to guest star on. And it's about how Homer's been abusive to Marge. And they go in and like they create stills. It is ungodly amusing, like because he's living out the sort of hero fantasy that he has. It's really good stuff. And you kind of get the idea of like, is he talking about Will Smith? Like, is this scenario about Will Smith and not, so yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing Will Smith is not the guest special star.
No, he is not. He is not. It's another SNL alum that it's nice to see him in. Like, in fact, like I kind of wonder like why this guy hasn't been asked back to host many, many times.
Interesting.
Which, by the way, boy, oh boy, with the fallout from this election, I bet they're pretty pissed at SNL because, they had all this stuff ready to go, and now they're just going to keep doing the same thing that they've been doing for the last 8 years. Because I can't think of an era where you kept bringing on a character like an ex-president as much as they did on SNL.
Right.
Like, I think that they meant to lean into Biden after he won his election in 2020, but they just really kept Trump jokes there more than anything. And now they've got another 4 years of Trump jokes. So it's 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What are they going to do?
I don't know. I think everything that's been written has been written. And I think he'd be very.
What is Shrimp AJ going to do? Because his Donald Trump impression is the reason he got onto SNL, and it's very good. But it's like at some point you got to be him going, oh fuck,
right?
I got to do this now.
Still
for the next,
more. I've read a lot about SNL auditions and the thing, so that you bring in like 3 original characters and you're supposed to bring in 3 impressions that you can do. And so one of the impressions that Will Ferrell did was Harry Carey. Mm-hmm. And I heard an amazing interview with Will Ferrell back in the day where he talked about how he worked for his girlfriend at an auction house, and his job was to drive these auction pieces and paperwork from one place to the other around Los Angeles. So he's doing his groundling things at night, and he's driving this stuff during the day as his day job. And he said, he's a big sports fan, loves baseball. Will Ferrell loves baseball. And he said LA had just experimented with bringing in and broadcasting over the radio ball games that were like at a home ball field that wasn't in LA. Like, so for example, if it's 1990 and you want to listen to a Pittsburgh Pirates game, you don't really have an option on the radio.
Right.
Like television, you can find it, somewhere because there's a million channels, but on the radio, you just never hear that. And so most teams at the time didn't send out their announcer to do this. And so LA starts experimenting with it, and he hears Harry Carey for the first time ever.
Okay.
Right? And if you're not familiar, like everyone's got a bad Harry Carey impression. In fact, we did that on the show one day. We had 3 dueling Harry Carey like impressions. That was just wonderful because some people brought it down like this, and some people brought it up high like this. And no one did a good impression of Harry Carey. They were just sort of impressions of Will Ferrell's impression of Harry Carey. Yeah. So
impression telephone.
Right. Which I think are some of the, like, that's the best way you can get Christopher Walken over here, cowbell. So he tells a story about hearing Harry Carey and just being enamored of what this was. And so wanting to find out more information. So like calling people he knew in Chicago. And so he listened to every one of these games. And Harry Carey starts to become a national celebrity, not just like a Chicago, Cubs celebrity, but a national celebrity. And so he wrote a sketch. There was a famous baseball strike in the mid 90s, and it meant that everyone was out of work, right? Including Harry Carey. And so he wrote a sketch for the Groundlings where the sketch looks like a piece of like community readers theater, and there's 6 people on stage, and he's dressed in his Harry Carey garb as one of them. And so the scene starts, and there's like a 5-minute scene between a couple, and they're discussing, something about how I can't believe that the Pattersons, are doing this. And like, well, I heard that they're going to split up, and it's very straightforward, and these people are very serious. And then they go, like blackout. And so then the person who's reading stage direction is like, the curtain rise, and it's Betty and Tom's bedroom. And in his best Harry Carey, as if Harry Carey's doing public theater or like community theater, he's like, damn it, Betty, our marriage is a sham. We've been in a loveless relationship for a decade. And she goes, Tom, I can't believe you'd say that. He goes, I want a divorce. And so they have this back and forth, and he goes, I took it completely seriously, as if Harry Carey was completely serious about being in this thing. And so he does that for his SNL audition, is like his Harry Carey impression. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I'd be able to like contain myself. No. I would be laughing so hard I'd be crying.
Yeah. I remember seeing him as Harry Carey, having no idea who Harry Carey was. Yeah. I was just a little kid when I first saw that. All I knew was that this is amazing.
This is funny.
And then when you're told that's a real person that he's doing, that's really what that guy sounds like. That's when it reaches a new level. I was just thinking a lot about Will Ferrell the other day as Alex Trebek.
Yeah.
And how much he nails it as a comedic performance, as like a linchpin for all of the Celebrity Jeopardies they had on there.
He needs to be the straight man. He needs to be the foundation. And even when things get ridiculous, it would have been easy for him to match some of those like chaotic energies, but because he doesn't, it makes it so much better.
He leans into exasperation so that it's so funny how much they're torturing Alex Trebek. I also love too some of the writing choices. Like every time that we had a Celebrity Jeopardy skit, it was the second segment on that episode of Celebrity Jeopardy, right?
Yeah, right.
So an entire segment had already happened off screen that we don't see, and there's some opening allusion to whatever had just happened. and
like they all have such negative scores.
And I don't know if this was which one this was, but it's Ferrell as Trebek going and like, just remind all of our panelists, please refrain from using ethnic slurs. Like, once again, I want to remind you.
I mean, I love I of course, the Sean Connery impression from Daryl Hammond is great in those sketches. Yeah. And usually like whoever the celebrity host was filled one of those roles, right? So there's one time where I think Ben Stiller was hosting and he did his Tom Cruise impression. Mm-hmm. But really the standouts were that and then Norm Macdonald
stole it every
as
single
Burt
time.
Reynolds. And just like the way he was chewing gum, he's like, yeah, it's not my name. And he goes, what? He's like, no, that's not my name. And he goes, Turd Ferguson. And like,
yeah, what do you want?
Yeah, we want. Those sketches they play so well.
Yeah.
They're so good.
Yeah. God dang.
And then the way like the verbal wordplay on some of them like is just amazing. Like I'll take swords for 400. Yeah. And he goes, it's S words. And he goes, this is the opposite of the moon. And he goes, saber. Starts with a bloody S. And just be like, that's so smart.
You know what Celebrity Jeopardy also makes me flash back to is 2003, summer of 2003, after graduating high school and like getting my first apartment. And I finally had my own computer, and it was an iMac G4. And I remember using, I think, LimeWire. One of the first things I started trying to download was Celebrity Jeopardy clips, because those were some of like the very first things that were being shared at that time. I don't know, that us talking about it made me completely flashback to 2003.
Jill talks to me all the time about they would download MIDI files in her house, right? Like this is way back in the day, and her brother was a real computer kid, so of course they did stuff like this. So every week he would change what the startup noise would be, and so this is back in the day when like starting your computer took 3-4 minutes, and then rather than the like blung when it starts, right? He would do things like have the whole speech about like from Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where it's like we're a non-communist dictator. And she goes, the thing was you couldn't stop it. There was no stop button. You had to listen to the whole thing as this MIDI went out. And so then years later, every time I was over at Phil Lund's house, my good buddy Phil Lund, the best man at my wedding, I would do like if there was like a party going on, I'd sneak to his bedroom and I'd clump his computer. And what that means is I would change the background image to a picture of Eddie Murphy as the Nutty Professor, and then I would change every single file icon to the poster from the Nutty Professor, and then I would add a bunch of sounds in there. So like when he'd click on something, rather than the click noise, it'd go clumping charge. And all sorts of stuff. And there's one I remember when he had to start up his computer because he started it and it scared the shit out of him. It was something along the lines of like where all of a sudden he goes like, who the hell's in there? And so that plays when he's in the other room while he's just starting his computer. Oh, I loved clumping his computer. It was one of my favorite pranks. It was so good. So good to just clump it. Just clump it. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information. Tucker, I definitely think that of all the monster characters, you would be Van Helsing.